Hi everyone, and welcome to a new tutorial on making retro games. Today I was thinking about making the Asteroids game, so I'm going to show you a little video from YouTube on what I mean about that. So let's take a look. Right, now that you know what I mean, I'm going to show you what we should be doing to make a clone of this game. We're not going to clone it exactly, obviously. I have found some sprites, as you can see here. I've created a few folders. First of all, I've created the audio, prefab scripts and sprites folder. I've added 4 sprites to the folder: asteroid, ship. I've added something called thing. Maybe we could use that as the alien ship that comes in with this past. And I've created a star field in Photoshop. This isn't a Photoshop tutorial, so I'm not going to show you how to do that, but maybe I'll put in the description of the video a link to the tutorial I used for that. So the first thing we're going to do, first of all, is to put the star field as our background. So let's do this, and let's call it background. Right. And we are also going to put the ship. So let's do this. Let's put the ship. And let's have a look at what it looks like when it's live like this. We can't see the ship because probably of layers. So I need to add a sorting layer. I'm going to have background. Okay, that's my fault. Let's have background here. Let's have asteroids. Let's have our ship. And let's have the score. I do apologize about that, guys. I just assumed we were in the right layer system. Now, if I put the background in the background layer, and if I put the ship on the ship layer, this time we see it, and there it is, and it's actually a little bit too big. Okay, so let's make this at least half the size. Let's see what that gives us. I'm also doing Z, there's no need, but it's just so everything's equal. I've got a little bit of OCD taking place from time to time, so this seems still a little big. Let's make it maybe 0.4, and let's see what that is going to give us. Right, so that seems a little better. Excellent, that is absolutely fantastic. Right, so the next thing we want to do is to have a controller for this ship. We want to be able to control it, to make it spin left or right, and to make it go forward as well. So let's create a C# script. Let's call it ship controller, and let's drag and drop it onto our ship whenever it wants to. There we go. And let's double click it. Okay, so Visual Studio opens. It's opened in my other window, so I'm going to drag this over in just a second when it's finished opening. There we go. Okay, so I don't think we're going to need the start for this at the time being. We're probably going to need the update. But what I absolutely want is a rotation speed. So I'm going to make a serialized field for this private float rotation speed. Okay, and then I also need a rotation input, and I don't need to interfere with that or to interact with that within Unity. So let's just do a private float rotation input. Okay, so what we want in update is to get that rotation input. Okay, so because it's a private, I will use the this keyword. I do not put any underscore in front of my private names or so on. So to ensure that I know this is a private variable, I always put the this keyword. Okay, so this dot rotation input equals input I could type dot get axis, and we're gonna get the horizontal axis. Okay, and then what we're gonna do in the fixed update is that we are going to, so fixed update is a procedure that gets called automatically at a fixed rate. I believe that fixed rate is 100 Hertz, that means 100 times a second. As for update, this gets called as often as possible by the application. It could get called at 30, 60 times a second, or 100, 1,000 times a second. But the computer, or the CPU, will try to call this as often as possible. So let's have a look at fixed update. We're going to add fixed update, and we're going to go if this dot rotation. Did I call it something? Yes, you see, I made a mistake here, didn't I? So Control R, and we're going to rename this to rotation input. I thought I made a mistake. There we go. So rotation input is excellent. So if this dot rotation input is smaller than 0, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to say the transform for this game object dot rotate, and we are going to rotate it vector. We're going to pass it a vector 3 dot forward, and we are going to multiply this by the rotation. So this dot rotation input, sorry, rotation speed, apologies, and multiply this by time dot date the time. So there we go. And then we're also going to do if this dot rotation input is bigger than 0, then we're going to say, well, we're going to copy this actually, and we're going to change it slightly. We're going to say not forward, but we're going to say back. There we go. Now let's go and have a look at what this gives us. So this is compiling the script. Now let's go and press play, and let's turn left or right. So turning left or right, and nothing is happening at the moment. I think this is because I didn't put the speed. Yes, it's at 0. Let's put a speed of 180. Okay, so per second it will turn half a circle, 180 degrees. Let's have a look. So yeah, it's turning now, but when I release my key, it keeps spinning. And I'll show you why this is happening, and there is a solution to this. And I want it to stop spinning as soon as I release my key. So let's go back to the script, and oh, did I get it to run? Yes, it's running by mistake. Let's go back. What I'm going to do is here, I'm going to put a debug. So debug.log, and I'm going to put rotation, and I'm going to put this dot rotation input. Let's have a look. Hopefully you'll see this in the recording. Let's have a look at what happens when we do this. So we're going to bring up the console here. I'm going to click play, and you'll see that rotation is 0. But if I go, you see it goes in between 0 and 1. And when I keep pressing it, it's nearly 1, but it's not necessarily 1. And when I release, it goes down very quickly to 0, but does not go to 0 straight away. So in order to avoid this, we are going to use, instead of using getAxis, we're going to use getAxis row. And what getAxis row does is that it will give you 0 if you don't press a key, and 1 if you press a key, or -1 if you press the other key, left, for example. So let's have a look at that. Compiling, playing, and keep an eye in your editor console. Okay, so now we're going left, and it stops straight away. We're going left now, and that is -1, and right is +1. And you see the number on the right hand side is increasing in the console. So this is working now as intended. Perfect. Just changing the call helped us. We can now remove this debug. We don't need it, and we can save this. So we've got our rotation sorted out. I don't really want to keep this in the fixed update. So what I want to do instead is to create a procedure that will do this, and we'll call it rotate ship. Actually, we'll just call it rotate. We're inside the ship controller, so we know this is to rotate the ship. Okay, and I'm going to copy paste this here. There we go. And here I'm going to call rotate. And there we go. So let's save and let's go and get it compiled and then play and see if that works. Always test your stuff. There we go. Left, right. It's working fantastically well. Excellent. So we've done the first part. We've got our starfield, we've got our ship, and we've got our ship which is able to rotate as and when we use the left and right key. And I believe it also works if we use the A and D key. So we have A key and D key. So the ASWD keys basically. Okay, fantastic. Right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the thrust for the ship. So if you remember when we looked at the video from YouTube of the retro game Asteroids, we saw that when the ship thrusts forward, it keeps its inertia for a while and slowly slows down until it stopped, or until we change direction and thrust into a different direction. So let's try and go and do this together. So in order to do this, I want to use a rigid body on the ship. The reason I want to use a rigid body is that I want to add force to that ship. Okay, this is how I want to move it. So I'm going to click on my ship, I'm going to add a component, and I'm going to add a rigid body 2D. I don't want the gravity to be at 1, because as you know, if gravity is at 1, the ship is going to fall out of the sky. There we go, boom. So 0, and if I play again, you'll see that the ship now does not fall anymore. Excellent, fantastic. So we want a thrust force, so let's go back to our script for the ship, and let's also have a serialized field. Let's call it private float thrust force. There we go, and we'll should not forget to fill in the value like I did earlier for rotation speed. I'm also going to have a thrust input, so private float thrust input. There we go. Hopefully it's spelled properly. Let me have a look. Yes, it is. It's grayed out because it's not being used at the moment. And I'm also going to have a rigid body 2D, which I want to cache. So private rigid body 2D, and I'm going to call it RB. Now I'm going to cache this, and in order to cache this, I need the start procedure, and I'm going to do RB equals get component rigid body 2D. There we go. Now we've cached our rigid body. What does caching mean, if I haven't explained it before, is that we have access now to our rigid body throughout the script, and we've done that on the start. Start only gets called once. We don't have to get that rigid body again because it's not going to change. It's only going to be to have some force applied to it. Right, now we want to also get our thrust input, and this will be vertical, and I want to have the same functionality as the horizontal one. So in this case, I'm going to use the get axis row once again. But this time it's for thrust input, and this is for vertical. But we have a problem with this. We are going to be able to go forward as well as backwards if we're not very careful. And I don't want to be able to go backwards because you're not able to do this in the original game. And I don't believe in the original game you're able to slow down your ship unless you point in the opposite direction and then thrust in that opposite direction. So let's have a look at that. What we're going to do is pretty straightforward. We're going to create a procedure called thrust instead of writing it in fixed update. We've got a rotate one, so let's have a thrust one. So private void thrust. Oh, I don't know what I clicked there. I think it doesn't matter. And here we're going to go if this dot thrust force. Why is thrust force? Thrust input. Let's have a look. Thrust input is bigger than 0. Then we're going to go rigid body dot add force, and we're going to go transform dot up, because this is the direction we want it to go. At the moment our ship is pointing up, and up is always going to be the point of our ship. This is how we added it to our scene. And we're going to multiply this by our thrust force, which we are going to put in the inspector. So let's copy thrust here. We're going to rotate and thrust at every fixed update. And now let's go back to the game and let's make sure we have some kind of thrust here. So we've got a ship controller thrust. I don't really know. Let's put I don't know, 40, and let's see what that gives us. And let's play. So turning left, turning right. If I press forward, that's a little bit fast, and it's gone off screen, obviously. Yeah. So where has it gone? I don't know, but there it is. Okay, and it's not really slowing down either, so that's not so good. So let's have a look. If I were to turn around, what would happen? Turn around, go forward, turn around like this, and we can see, whoa, whoa, this is so hard. It's way, the force applied is way too much. Okay, so in order to sort that out, we're just gonna divide it by 2 and see what happens. First of all, if we're happy with that, and we can also tweak it. I think that's really good. We can tweak it. We could also add a maximum speed if we want, but at the moment we're going to leave it as it is. Right, that is absolutely fantastic. Now we have control over our ship. It can turn left, right, and go forward, and it cannot go backwards. I'm just going to test that because I haven't, to be frank with you, I forgot. So if I press down, nothing happens. Okay, nothing happens. Nothing happens whatsoever, because I'm not checking for a value of -1, so a value that is smaller than 0 on our input. So there we go. That is great. Another way for you to make sure that your game doesn't register the down key or the S key would be, I believe, to go to Edit, Project Settings, and then go into Physics 2D. Is it Physics 2D or just Physics? I think it might be just Physics. Let's have a quick look here. No, it's not actually, absolutely not. It's Input Manager. And go to the axis, and then you've got the vertical axis, okay, up and down, and negative button, down, we don't want that, we don't want down, and we don't want S either, so you could remove this. And by removing this, it will never get registered within the game. Right. So what I'm going to do now is to leave this lesson as it is. We've looked at adding our background sprite, we looked at adding our ship sprite, and adding a ship controller to allow our ship to turn left and right, and to thrust forward. So the next lesson will likely be about screen wrapping, because we want our ship, when it disappears on the left hand side, to reappear on the right, and vice versa, and when it disappears at the top to reappear at the bottom, and vice versa. So this will be the next lesson. I hope this lesson was useful to you guys. See you next time. Thank you.